you the chair?
I am the chair.
You have the floor. Jody is coming, she's just anticipating being a couple.
Well, our
minutes
challenge is,
1, 2, 3 is not a-
there's two challenges that we have. One is that without Jody,
late. You don't have a board?
we don't have Jody, we don't have Chris, and we don't have Brent. So,
So you have
we're at
three.
50%.
I think you have to have a majority to have a board, don't you?
We're an
think-
advisory board, we're not an actionable board, so, but that is,
I leave it at your discretion, sir. I was gonna go pull up the minutes really quickly and see what they say. But if you're good, no, the charter.
The charter, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say, sorry. Really easy to get to.
We'll let you do that, and then that will give us a minute to stall.
Okay.
So then, our other issue is Jody's the one who always takes notes.
Good point.
So you guys don't have bylaws, what I have is
No.
the ordinance.
Hmm.
How come you don't have bylaws? That's not the right one. Authorizing Red Lodge ordinance.
No, we have to have bylaws, don't we?
I think the renewal board did.
Yeah, there is. Let me look in my stuff and see.
So this doesn't have bylaws, but maybe we should, and if you find it, we'll get them up there.
I don't have it in my stuff. Hold on 1 second, sorry.
No worries.
Hey, Kyle. What's going on? Okay.
Did you find it, Jeremy?
Okay.
If I'm remembering right, I think
Okay.
I think the original board had bylaws, the one that was the advisory for whether or not to, renew resort tax.
Right.
Renewal board, I think that one had it, but after that, I think we just sort of defined the committee and its responsibilities just in the administrative ordinance. Or call.
Is that 952 you're thinking of from 2020? That sounds, the time frame is right. Resort Tax Committee 3413, let me go see what that tells me.
All right, well, thanks for coming on that.
There shall be a 6th member appointed. Administrative ordinance of the Resort Tax Committee will also include administrative process, educating public. Administrative ordinances recommended by committee, made by city council, and passage by bonding and collection. Yeah, you don't have anything.
All right, we're gonna start then, and we will catch up.
You wanna have one of your board members?
I can take notes.
You can take some notes,
There you go.
that would be great.
The big trick will be if I can read my handwriting afterwards.
Yeah, that would be mine as well. So we are gonna start, I'm just gonna use your paper version, because it's here. State resort tax meeting and next, call the meeting to order. All right. State resort tax meeting, next meeting update, both the mayor and I sat in on the state resort tax committee meeting. The majority of the meeting really surrounded, at least that I was capable of understanding, surrounded how they were gonna be funded and how much we would pay, to be funded. It started out, with, they had built a fee schedule, that, in my opinion, didn't seem fair or correct. Which, you know, it seemed like Big Sky was paying a lot, but when you broke it down, my suggestion was, why don't we divide it up based on resort tax collections, so that everybody would pay the same percentage of resort tax collections? That seemed to be well received and was essentially approved until the very end. Then some of the folks that had bigger resort tax collections started to go to balk on it a little bit. I'll be honest, I'm still really struggling to understand what the purpose is. I mean, definitely they want to lobby, in order, or advocate for the resort tax districts, but I was really struggling to figure out what issue it was that they were concerned about.
My understanding or recollection was that the ones that were the concerned were the ones that were growing and therefore at risk of losing it.
Yes, yes, but
Are they gonna still continue to be grandfathered in?
yeah, and I was struggling to figure out if that was our issue or not.
And then, yeah, and that's not our issue, why are we help funding their issue?
Yes, yeah, so I mean, I think it probably is good to have an association, but I don't know that, so that we stay all on the same page, but
Once you put fees in there.
yeah, that's exact, and then, you know, when I brought this up, and it kind of, I would say not only did I get a little bit of pushback, but it kind of like got a little bit of what the purpose is that what happens if we disagree? Like, what are we trying to accomplish as a committee? And then how do we deal with if there's a disagreement between members? And there wasn't, that was really not clear to me. And maybe it's because I haven't participated a ton, but you were on that
It's
first.
only been, what, 2, 3 meetings?
Yeah, it seems like Big Spy and Whitefish and West Yellowstone have maybe spent a lot more time talking about this. And I think they maybe have a clearer idea, but I was not clear, is what I would say.
And they were really looking for somebody to be secretary, and I told them, I am really not that person.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna vouch for that.
So
It waives
what,
our fees, maybe.
I think that's where it really started, when they were like, well, we can't find anyone to be treasurer, maybe we even need to do this, you know? Like, okay,
so there's two questions from there. The initial, that the charge wasn't equitable, and you're saying, your recollection is it didn't really get resolved.
I think it did get resolved, but then there was some pushback on that resolution at the end.
But then the other big thing is, how do they handle if there's disagreement among the member committees, AKA what to spend lobby efforts on,
Well,
et
yeah,
cetera?
or what's the process for deciding on what we're advocating for, right? Like, and it seemed, you know, they were talking about meeting again in 6 months, and I'm like, you know, in my mind, for the legislative session, if you don't have your stuff together in August or September, you are behind the 8 ball. Because
There's gonna be a lot of talk about, other raising probably the population limit, or, starting a sales tax, some type of local option tax for everybody.
I think there may be some talk about it. I think the governor's made it clear that he will veto anything that comes to his desk that has a sales tax on it.
So,
And so.
it may come in a different form.
It might, I think, there definitely will be some talk about I think there's some fear that from the resort tax communities is maybe the push by some of the bigger communities, like Missoula.
Mhm.
Missoula's gonna be a big one, to have a sales tax, may jeopardize the resort tax.
Right.
It doesn't seem like they've,
I think if I were I don't know, I think that there's some concern there for them. I mean, and there is some concern for us, obviously, if they were to eliminate the resort tax. A statewide sales tax could cause us problems too, if it's not a local option, and how does that work? So
It would all go to it would all go into the general fund, probably.
It's
I mean,
well,
it would-
you just don't know.
You
I mean,
don't know.
You just have no idea.
They would have to somehow protect the small communities that have come to rely on the resort tax, I would hope.
I would hope so.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
But, so then the question is that, do the ones who currently have it, is that just, is the status quo the main interest? Or is, in terms of the association and figuring out what these communities as an association have in common for what they would be advocating for, that to me was still a little, I get the idea that we all have a resort tax and we have an interest in maintaining our resort tax, but past that, and maybe that's the only thing so maybe that's the only purpose of the association, is to maintain the status quo without losing it. And that would be a reasonable thing to do, but then once you start advocating for something different than that, then it has to benefit everybody.
No, and I think when they first talked about it, they talked about, using each other as a resource for questions and concerns about the resort, on how to do different things, and being able to share an auditor, maybe,
Yeah, I
that
think-
type of thing was part of it,
The-
but I
the
don't know where that went.
First part that you missed is the question about how the lobbyist is funded.
Oh, okay,
And really, that was kind of the big question that come up, is that if we're grouping together funds to pay for a lobbyist, how is that
okay.
funded,
And you're,
Because we can't spend our resort tax money on this,
no,
so then the city would have to dedicate general fund money to it.
for
in the-
lobbying to keep our resort.
for lobbying to keep our resort tax, which is beneficial. So I think it's just a little more complicated, and in the world of municipal governments, and it's maybe a little more complicated than just throwing money into the association, and I don't know. I feel like the folks who are advocating for it maybe need it to be a little bit better on their pre-work. But I know they're passionate about it, but, you look at Big Sky, like, they have, 3 or 4 full-time people to just manage their resort tax. So for them,
Basically their city though.
it basically is. So, but then for them, and then to get, to pull us in and want us to participate at an equal level that they participate at is a much bigger ask,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
because our resort tax isn't funding anybody.
no.
So-
Employee.
So that's the update on the Resort Tax Association. I would say more to come, but what I was starting to say is I was a little surprised that they really, I would have thought even with that, I would have thought that the folks driving it would have said, okay, let's meet next week or next month, or let's continue to, it seemed like the next meeting was really far out to me for what they're doing. That's just my opinion.
Do we want to, you identified 2 or 3 key things there. Do we want to reach out individually? Is that something you should do? Is it something I would do, something Jeremy would do? What's your thought?
Maybe you and I can talk about it, and
Okay.
we can, I think it probably should reach out, and who reaches out, that it should be the URI probably.
Did they mention whether, I think there's like an executive committee and other committees,
Well-
are they meeting more often at least?
Maybe, and they were really kind of pulling, that's what Dave said, is they were pulling to get someone to be a treasurer, and we could volunteer for that, to be the association secretary-treasurer. I think it was just treasurer, I don't think it was secretary, I think it was treasurer. I wasn't eager to volunteer,
And they asked me point blank, and I said, I am not the right guy for that.
yeah.
And part of that's workload, and part of that is, that ain't my,
Yeah, they
I have strengths, that ain't one of them. So Tom and I will follow up on that.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, update on budget and timeline.
So I am behind where I'd like to be. next year's budget is gonna breeze because we're gonna have the format the same, it'll just be filling in and updating numbers. This year, it's a matter of communicating the 4 different buckets of money and why they're the same and why they're not the same. When you and I chatted last, you had said you were going to be putting, and I think you collectively were going to be putting, besides question, is this a pivot or is this just a regular table that's creating that?
It's the regular table.
Okay. I've been fighting with that for a week or 3, so I'm just saying.
I'm sure you had to do pivots too.
Yeah. You were gonna put together a budget and a recommendation. There were 2 major questions that came up. I think I'd like to hit it at least a high level here. I think we're making a little bit headway on, and I'll look to Lonnie. One of them was, to what extent is it appropriate for us to use some resort tax to help with meet our obligation to the fire, which is a statutory requirement that we pay. There was some ideas about capital, and it came up and it was wonderful, and then it got shut down, and then it turns out it's only mostly dead, not dead. In fact, it came back completely. I think that there's probably a follow-up conversation between Tom and Lonnie and me, to be grammatically correct. I know I was doing it real time in my head too. But there's also a secondary follow-up conversation that Tom needs to talk to the fire team. And then Lonnie, you said you had a chance to talk to the auditors.
Mhm.
What did you learn that would be appropriate to share at a high level here?
So, 'cause it was brought up that using resort tax funds to purchase a fire truck, that fire truck, that had come up before, and that's when I had talked to the auditors, and they said, we can't buy another entity capital if it's not the city. So the workaround that is the city would purchase the fire truck with the fire district using it. The city would create a user agreement with the fire district and spell it out what.
An MOU.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what when I talked to Kurt today, and it kind of sounds like that's kind of what he had.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't fully agree with him that the city can't buy capital for somebody else, but that.
Well, honestly, I'm going with what the.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
they're saying
my
it's in the
rule is we're
ordinance,
gonna
and I
have
don't
all-
see it in the ordinance anywhere that
And
says
so
that.
we can say, show us in black and white, but.
But either way, it doesn't
the answer is,
matter.
We can get there,
Yeah.
and the rule is,
Yeah.
I need Lonnie, Tom, and the auditors to all agree, and then I
Yeah.
will feel comfortable
Yeah.
moving forward
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
So the good news is, that solves probably the most significant and biggest worry about going into the budget this year, particularly as later this week, we have conversations with the police department. Now, we have not
Thursday,
determined
right?
that we have not yet determined that they are out of line. So we've had this conversation with the whole union not, and we've done several comparisons and found out we're not out of line as what they'd like to think we are. So I will tell you, my goal is to make sure that we're in line across the board. That does not mean you got a buck, you get a buck. If you were this far behind and you were this far behind, you're not gonna both get the same thing. You're both gonna get corrected as necessary. That's from the city perspective. The second question that I wanted to clarify, and part of this was, like, going back to Tom was gonna put together a conversation, and one of the concerns that Tom had was, it looked like that we were carrying a cash balance from a resort tax, which I didn't understand that we were. I know that we always do a big, overage, like we say, we're gonna pay off $800,000 and pay the pool off early, just in case we have a killer resort
Yeah.
tax year. And we learned the hard way that we needed to do that.
Right.
My question is if that's what's causing you to think we have, so let me ask you this generically, how much cash do we have at the end of the year in the resort tax? Am I asking that question properly, or is it, how much cash do we have at the end of the resort year? What's our carryover?
It just depends on what was budgeted, like for big capital expenses and stuff. But like the big numbers are placeholders. So cash-wise, probably between 750 to 800,000 starting cash as of July 1st.
Okay,
But some of that can be because we budgeted to spend it in the prior year and it didn't happen. Like that one year, we we kept carrying over $300,000 for a snowplow that, or whatever it
But
was.
it's not
you know.
but that, like, the carryover stuff, it's because we're shooting our revenues up here. So 1.8 million, right, is what
Right,
we-
1.8, I think is what we did.
and then we have cash available. So those two things have to equal the expenditure side. So the
Right.
placeholders for the 400,000 that we put in there for street improvements, the
Right.
400 and some thousand for,
Recreational development, yeah.
So-
those were just placeholders. We're not carrying any kind of cash reserve for those.
Now you said 750 to 800,000. Do we have 750 to 800,000 cash on hand?
I don't remember what.
895, 782.
Okay, so here's,
Currently today, so 900,000 currently. Last year, it was, I can tell you what it was last year too. Last year, it was, I didn't have it last year. The year before was 776.
So that 800 and some that I sent you yesterday, that doesn't, I have not taken out the
Yeah.
transfer to general,
Yeah.
because I won't know that till the end.
Right.
of June.
Yeah.
And did you take out the water and the sewer already out of that? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so-
everything but that transfer.
so let me say from a very high level, my philosophy on resort tax, and everybody tell me where I'm wrong. So we have some number that we expect is, we're gonna collect in resort tax.
Mhm.
When it comes to must-spend projects,
Mhm.
and the apprehension that I had when we were on it and when we were renewing it was that municipalities tend to spend money like first-year college graduates. Can we afford the payment? Then we can afford it. And the problem is, resort tax can do this, as we all saw 2
Right,
years ago. After we thought, yay, resort tax went up, then it took a big dive again. So to me, whether it be street projects, whether it be fire trucks, whether it be whatever, there's some amount, which is a fairly conservative amount, that is allocated, that we're gonna be spending that, and we're obligated whether we collect that resort tax or not.
right.
So we want to keep that number somewhat reserved. However, there's a lot of projects that we can do that if we have a killer year, then I'd say 800,000 in cash. Why do we have 800,000 in cash? Let's pay off the pool, or let's pay off the this, or let's pay off the that. Let's pay off the stormwater early, you know?
Yeah,
So I look at that. But what is the number that we hang in? There's some in my mind, some small amount we hold over in case next year really, really sucks and we didn't see it coming. Because the alternative is then it's gonna have to come out of our general cash on hand, and that's a problem.
well, you're gonna have to have 150,000, 100,000 and 150, that, and 98,000 for the pool. And so you automatically, I mean, those are, and whatever we pay our parks
Wait, no.
person,
Which I did last year, I did the asterisk next to
Yeah,
every
like-
line item.
right, these
was
are all-
obligated. And then after that.
So
that's-
pre-obligated, is that just a
Right.
good
yes,
category?
yes,
So we have a pre-obligated amount, and the goal is to make sure that that pre-obligated is in reality a really, really conservative number.
Could I drive the ship just for a second?
Absolutely.
So,
You have the
will
con.
you let me share?
Yes. Give me a second. You have the con.
It's hard to get people out of your store when you're spending money. Gotta go. Uh-huh.
There's a delay. Gotta make sure I don't look up there because there's a delay.
Okay. Or do look up there before you start talking about it.
Yeah, okay, all right. So can you guys see that relatively well?
Yeah.
All right, so what, so what I want to talk about is, we brought in this year a little over $1.3 million. So that's an increase of, we'll just go back just for a second here, and see, at least according to my records, it is this 1.364 currently year to date. Last year was 1.176. And, the year before was 1198.
Yes.
So, now, there is a challenge that we have in our reporting. We have multiple challenges in our reporting. But one thing is to understand is that when we look at resort tax reports, we tend to look at not the cash that came in on a certain date. We look at the collections based on when the obligations was earned, so it's an accrual base. This is the actual cash on hand. So when you look at resort tax collections for this year, if you would not include April, May, and June, because we actually won't collect April, May, and June until July. Does that make sense?
Right.
So this is actual cash in the Lonnie based on the cash report. So
Which budget does that go into, the stuff that we collect in July? Is that next year's budget?
yes, next year's budget, yes, because in simple terms, although I believe the resort tax is an enterprise fund, which puts it into accrual accounting, essentially, we talk about it in cash terms, not in accrual terms. Okay, so coming back to this budget that I just.
That's on your screen, is why I
Yeah,
can't hide it on mine.
Can I hide it on mine?
Yeah. You could just probably drag it off to the side if you go back into your screen.
There you go, okay. Thanks. Okay. Is that this budget right here, now, there's some big pushes in this, so I want to just be clear, and we'll start. And I can do this actually if we want to talk about obligated funds here, and I'm just going to make
Is it pre-obligated?
pre-obligated.
Well, this isn't, this
right,
isn't
well-
obligated because.
All right,
Okay.
so there is some obligation here, not necessarily, is that there is tax relief, okay? Tax relief is 5%, correct? So that 90,000 is maybe a little high in this because we're not anticipating that much.
No,
but-
that number is budgeted in there based on the revenue.
Yeah. So if the revenue were to drop, it would drop, just based on the numbers that we're talking about. Water at 100, sewer at 150, okay? Pool, in terms of operation, at about 100, okay? Now, there is income into this that's not necessarily calculated,
Right.
but there is income into that, and I can talk about that later. Principal and interest on pool is 100,000.
So you're telling me our operation is 100,000 on top of not counting
Yeah.
the capital?
Well,
That seems
the
like a
bond payment's
significant-
98,000.
Yeah, but that's on line 11, not line
Right.
10. Line 10, you're saying is
I'm just-
operation.
I'm just looking at the expenditures year-to-date.
But we do have offsetting fees.
Yes, there is offsetting fees into that.
Which those fees are included in that amount that I gave you.
I subtracted them out.
Okay.
Okay. So it costs us more than $100,000 to run a pool. We used to run for $40,000 a year when it leaked out the sides. Okay, all right, okay.
Okay?
Okay.
It also costs way more,
How many managers do you have?
but yeah, it costs way more to run everything than it did 4 years ago, so.
Fair statement.
Let's not use that as a
You
general.
don't have one manager and like
Okay.
5 lifeguards. You
Yeah.
have-
So to jump
All right,
ahead, is
okay,
everything on
let's-
here
yeah.
pre-spent?
No, it's
Pretty
not
obligated.
necessary. So streets operation and maintenance, you could find, in all of this, you could find efficiencies and reduce it. But this is basically just looking back at the last couple of years and seeing where it is primarily this year. Streets operation and maintenance is 100,000 and parks is 100,000. Now, we have one full-time person, but there's other expenses that go along with that. And if they're gonna actually do anything, right, like you could have a person, but if they can't buy gas, it's not worth it to have them. So we're committed with that one person to about $200,000 between streets and parks to pay for them to actually do stuff.
And we have 80K of projects that is not counting the person.
That's correct. Yeah, so there's some lines I've added here.
Okay,
All right, so then you get a streets capital piece and a parks, it just says capital improvements, that's actually parks capital improvements, by the way.
Oh, okay.
That underneath there, that goes with carts, so just separating those, so just so we can understand it, because the numbers that would probably, where we would put extra funding is in those capitals. So then, law enforcement, I put that at 100, my understanding from our conversations, but I wanted to confirm this, is that it was $100,000 basically every 2 years.
2 cars every 2 years?
2 cars every 2 years, so next year they don't necessarily, so really that should be 50,000, but I was being generous to think that they maybe had other capital improvements that they might need, I don't know. But, so maybe that if we were really to be really realistic on a multi-year basis, that's maybe somewhere closer to 8 instead of 100. But let's just ballpark it in there.
Okay.
So then I threw in that 80 fire and EMS that we were contemplating,
Okay.
and then admin of 20, that was actually a calculated number, that's 13,000 for resort, or for, software, it's money for, it's part of the audit, and there was something else in there that I don't remember what it was.
Do I get to pay for any of my staff?
You cannot.
Not,
Even-
so that
Actually,
admin does not?
technically, anything in admin is outside of the ordinance, if you want to be truthful.
Okay.
But I think it's reasonable that you've got funds, by law, you have to have an audit on those funds, so to spend those funds on the audit probably makes sense,
So the
right?
audit that's budgeted is for business audit, it's not for the city audit.
Oh, okay,
Those are business audits.
okay. Did we spend money on business audits? There was something in the expenditure category on audit, I thought, I could be wrong. Okay. Okay, so in any case, so we could add that in there too. So that gets you to about $1 million, all
Okay.
right? So that's the base to start there. We have a 1.3, all right? If we want to be a little conservative, this base could fluctuate. You've got about another $300,000 to play with in this budget, okay?
So I have a question. So in my mind, I see a pre-obligated, we'd have to pay it no matter what. So for instance, if we have a full principal and interest, we'd have to pay that no matter what.
Yeah.
When we get down to, and I would say fire and EMS, we have to pay that, no, well, I would just say fire, I would not say NDMS. Why does it say NDMS? Just have it out of you?
That's the line item.
Okay, all right. So those to me are things like there. When you get to parks, not the staff person, the staff person is a pre-obligated, we'd have to lay somebody else to solve that. When you get to parks, we say, hey, there's $80,000, but you don't get to spend that money in that portion of the budget until after we're confident we're gonna get there.
Yes, I agree with you, but I think you're nailing down to a level that you don't need to. All right, and why I would say that is, and this is what you'll start to think about in terms of your budget carryover, okay?
Okay,
So that flex money in terms of, you gotta have some cash to operate with, right? So you can't bring your cash holdover down to zero.
right.
Right, you don't wanna go to Lonnie and say, how much is left in the resort tax fund, and she says,
I'm gonna miss that
nothing,
party.
so we can't pay the parks guy at the first payroll until July 20th, until people come in, right? Like, you have to have some in there, so there's a reasonable amount in there. And that reasonable amount is probably what you might see in a fluctuation in your resort tax income, right? Because that will drive you through the next year, okay?
So would you
So,
say that you would like maybe set a certain percentage of this and make sure we have that as a carryover?
yes.
Like 50%,
No.
30%?
What,
Close-
that's why I
closer
want,
to-
that's why I wanted
Closer
to do,
20.
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to do my breakout to these are the absolutes, and then have a percentage that's of that.
Yes, you could do that. I think you're just getting too granular with it, because the reality is, these all become they're kind of absolutes. It's not that you can't take them out of there, but if you were to say to take out the 50 in capital, then what you're saying is that we can't spend that until the end of the budget year, when we know what money we've got coming in, and so you want to build it in the reality is, you're gonna know what your resort tax income looks like, by the end of October, right? And the reason for that is because you get your payments in July for the second quarter of the year, and then you've got your third quarter payments, and those are the bulk of your resort tax. And so unless you were to have,
And I'm gonna be spending that money next spring in the construction season. But like, is that 100,000, is that payments, or is that just because we've always done 100,000 that goes to water?
We've obligated
we
100,000.
obligate, that's obligated.
That is a loan payment.
You could change that, but it's essentially obligated.
Yeah, I wouldn't even bring that up, because
Yeah.
I did talk to bond counsel on that, because those numbers are. factored
Obligated
in.
into the bonds.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
obligated.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that when I look at this list, I want, and your list has a star next to all of those that are obligated, right?
My old one, I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
if I
So
can-
when I look at this list, I want to know, these are the thou shalt not touch, they are forced.
Right.
And those are,
So on another,
The only thing, so you have three, it's that, the answer to your question is easy. The thou shalt not touch are then the 100 for water, the 150s for sewer, and the 98 for pool. Everything else, you can lay off your guy, nothing else is touchable.
But that pool principal has to be paid.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, that's in the obligated.
So that's just above the space, the blank line.
Which is the fourth?
Tax relief,
Ta-
water.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
yep, I didn't include
Okay.
tax relief.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, so,
Okay.
tax
So
relief was
those
included.
four are the thou shalt not touch.
Yeah.
You can't, they're already spent.
Yeah,
well, you
so
know,
you already know you're gonna get that.
No, I know I have to pay it. I don't know if I'm gonna get
Yes,
it.
you do. I mean,
I hope like hell we're gonna get it.
well, you,
it would have to be a very
what
catastrophic.
what could happen to drop our
don't-
resort
you
tax
did not
below
just-
$400?
don't- not just say that out loud.
Please don't say that out loud.
Might be.
Well, you've already,
You've already shut down the pass once before.
no, but you're already, what is the July collection is gonna be close to 250,000 of it.
That's true, yeah.
Okay,
That's already, it's already been
For July,
collected.
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
We're
that's what I'm
safe
saying,
this year.
Yeah,
So far,
I-
that part.
I just wanna bring focus here for a second.
Okay.
Because while, Mr. Mayor, you are bringing up a point, you are driving us down a road right now that we could sit here and argue for weeks and weeks. That is not going to get us to coming up with a realistic budget,
Okay,
because the reality is that we have to build this budget based on expectations. And if we start to try to build a budget based on an expectation that the entire city is gonna shut down for COVID again on July 1st and have no income, isn't realistic. So realistically, here is your obligation. It's about just a little over $1 million. Let's even just say 1.1 million is your obligated funds. The way the resort tax budget is, if you take out the fire, because we haven't made that agreement yet, so it's just under $1 million is obligated.
okay. Now let me go back to my deal, because what we're talking about is what's an appropriate carryover amount. If I know that there's an obligation of 90 plus 100 plus 150 plus 100 plus 80 for a fire, so that's my obligated. What percentage of that that to me is the only thing that factors into what I should keep into cash on hand. So if next year we're a disaster, we've got half of it on hand.
So I'm gonna give you a different way to think about that.
Okay.
Is instead of thinking about that, I would think about it in terms of your total estimated collection. So what do you think is a realistic cushion in your total estimated collection? So there's two pieces. We're gonna throw out this $500,000 income and expense that we don't necessarily expect to do.
Okay.
So just know that that's gonna be out there. That's gonna increase our thing, but we're not talking about that yet. But when we're done with this, we're gonna add a $5,000 income and a $500,000 expense that are extra. $5,000 extra anticipated and $500,000 extra spent, okay? That's in case we get,
Considering what we've been receiving lately, I would say conservatively, we should always get at least $1 million in resort tax, the way we've been going.
and,
For a normal year. I mean, even if we have like a big recession in the economy, whatever, I think that we're gonna be really
Even-
close to
even
that
if-
$1 million.
Yeah, even if you look at COVID, we didn't see a 30%
Oh, no,
reduction.
we
Even
saw
if-
an
even-
increase from
Even if you
COVID.
look at the flood, we didn't see a 30% reduction, so.
Right.
So, yeah, well, it was a drop though, because we only
Yeah.
collected 800 and some, but we budgeted 400 and some, and that, hence, that's where we got into
Yeah.
the
Right.
issue. So.
We
going
only
forward-
collected 800,000 the year of the flood?
No, COVID.
COVID.
Flood, I don't know what the flood.
Oh, I thought
The year
COVID
after,
was a
no,
massively
the
good
year
year for
after
us.
we,
Yeah.
2021 was good.
Well, Tom's
Okay.
got all the numbers from the previous
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
up there, right?
Yeah,
And another-
okay,
So,
all right.
so, the,
You're dragging Dave along. that one.
2020 is, collections were 835, and then 21-22 was 1.2 million.
So, I mean, I would say that we would be really, I mean, even unless something catastrophic happened again, you know, even if we had a recession, that type of thing, I think we could count on right around $1 million every year, very conservatively.
So the base there is, what you're talking about is a 30% cushion holdover. So if you have 30% of your budget, so if you hold over $300,000 at the end of the year, that's gonna give you, and you carry that into the budget, that will, and then you budget to have $300,000 at the end of that next year, that gives you that cushion that you're looking for.
Okay, let's pause. Are you good with that number as far as like
So I'm
that?
just curious, so if we have 800 cash sitting there right now, are you suggesting we spend 500,000 before the end of the year?
Mhm.
And what are we gonna spend that on?
The pool. That's what I'm gonna suggest.
Well, if we take the snowball approach, what is there, yeah, so to me,
Is there, but, just
Oh.
quick question, but is there a reason why we don't want, I just get nervous when you start depleting. I know you're saying the 300,000 and stuff, but
I
I've
hate
just
paying
seen
interest.
I've seen times of the city where there's been no cash.
So that's a question. Can you use resort tax cash to fund other things? No,
No.
you can't even use it.
So then that doesn't tie to it then.
Yeah.
It only ties to the stuff that we could use resort tax for. And so if we've got this stuff that we need to cover resort tax for, then we should use it to pay off. But then the other thing is, what, if we list the outstanding obligations, water, sewer, pool, which one do we own the least on?
The water and sewer, that's just a
Transfer.
transfer.
Yeah, it's a transfer.
That's not going like.
It's not actually paying anything off.
It's going towards debt relief, but.
But if the debt is gone, we no longer have to do that.
Yeah, you don't got enough in resort tax to pay. off.
Yeah,
So my question is, of the outstanding ones, what has the least amount of balance left to it? Is it the pool?
The pool.
Yeah. And just another piece is that with this whole resort tax, philosophy, we committed that we would do the 100 and the 150, but not anymore. So that's kind of a set amount, but it's not, that debt obligation is on water and sewer users, not on resort tax. The only debt currently on resort tax is the pool.
Pool, okay. And the sooner we get it paid off, the sooner we can
Do
take on
it.
the next project, whether that be paying down stormwater early, whether that be doing any
Yep.
of those other things
Yes,
early.
that's correct.
So to go to your question of, and I get okay with being nervous of it, but we're paying money, we're paying interest, that if we pay it down now, we're saving money over what we're spending on. So it's a little bit of the same thing we did under Bill. Remember when we did kind of our consolidations and kind of got it down, get less payments, make them go away, get less payments, make them go away. So, and the pool may not be gone completely this year, but as long as we know we're gonna be good next year, and I tend to look at that list and say, let's pick like what our lowest is in the last 5. So let's small detour, I promise not to go very far. What was the single biggest impact to our resort tax that we've seen in the last 5 years? In my mind, it was when we lost access to the pass.
Yes.
That is not off the table this year. The erosion that is happening up on the top of the pass, we could lose access to the pass this year. That's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, and I could go back to the year that we did lose the pass because of,
2022 in the flood?
no, 2007,
11,
was it?
11?
2011?
No, I don't know, 10? It was the year it rained and rained and rained.
I'm thinking
And then they had
2022 is the
mudslide.
last time we lost access to the pass.
It was until the end of July.
You mean 2020?
No,
No,
2022.
The flood.
Oh, the
The
flood.
flood, yeah. You know.
That's, look what happened to our resort tax that year over the year previous.
Well, it came back, we got the pass back the end of July. But we didn't have access to the whole northern part of the park until after the pass was closed.
Yeah, I see, I see, that's what I would say, is the impact was not the pass. The impact was the park.
Yeah.
So, I would actually disagree, or just maybe add, is that, yes, closing the pass would be an impact to us. Losing access to Yellowstone would be a bigger impact to us, so.
But if people didn't come through us to get to Yellowstone,
Yeah, but
They
they
still
can
can go
go,
to
Chief Joseph, as long as there's a way around the Beartooth, you're okay. But if you were to lose it in Lamar, which is what happened during the flood, that was more the impact.
so from my conservative standpoint, as long as I'm convinced that we could handle our obligations
Mhm.
if we lose the pass, then I am completely on board with saying that surplus cash that we're holding should not be held. We should use it to pay the pool down.
And I'll add another piece to this, is that, you know, the city, like, we're not, are we outside of our bond, our borrowing capability? Are we close to our borrowing capability, or do we have?
On water and sewer?
Or no, just, yeah, in general, on anything?
No, I don't believe so.
No, but I don't want to be either.
I know, I understand, but if there was an emergency and a catastrophe, opposed to holding a bunch of cash, for an unlikely possibility, if you were to do it and you had to meet these
We
obligations,
pull out our
you could-
visa for an
you pull out a
unexpected
visa and you run it to the next year, and then you pay down that debt. So, because you've already paid down debt, right? So instead of holding cash, because you don't, so if there was an emergency, you just retake that debt again,
Yes.
and then.
It's a HELOC. We have the ability to
Yeah,
pull it out
that's
on an
exactly
as-needed basis.
That's exactly.
All right, so
And I-
Lonnie, does that track with you, and are you okay, and you're following that?
It's up to,
See, I mean, I'm
No,
not
but I
opposed,
want you to feel warm and fuzzy about it, too.
yeah.
I'm not opposed to having a nice reserve, though. I'm really not. I mean, we've had some really crazy
Well,
things happen the
well,
last couple of years.
But is a nice reserve 300,000, or is it 800,000?
Yeah.
Well, as long as you've got a HELOC, it doesn't really matter, like, pay it down. Pay down the
Okay.
debt, and then you can always pull it back.
I will tell you, that's my inclination. That was when we signed up for the pool,
So,
that was what we said we would do.
because ultimately you get to make this decision, I'm gonna ask you to be quiet for a second.
They make it, but okay.
All right, no, we don't make it, so that's what we're gonna give to, we're gonna.
Those two.
Oh, I understand. So we're gonna go through our process and just, I feel like we've had discussion, I'd like to give you guys some time to make a comment, and then we can have a thing of what we wanna recommend to you.
How much is left on the pool, Lonnie?
Where's the,
Balance.
I have no idea, I'd have to, I don't know it off the top of my head.
I want $1.5 million, or,
What did we budget, or what did we pay one?
Is it 98,000 for 20 years,
Mhm.
or was it 10?
I wanna say 10.
So we
It
could
was
make
over
it,
$1 million, I know.
I think this would get us a third of the way there, but that's just my,
Yeah, and like I
Gut
said,
feeling.
this is your guys' decision. 300,000, I think, is reasonable to keep in there as a starting point. But we just have to, on the budget part of it, make sure we budget enough to cover what is coming in, because I am not going through that whole process of debt relief again, like we did.
Yeah, we'll make sure that.
we don't want.
So the question is for you guys, how do you feel about reducing our cash balance and using that money to pay off the pool debt at this time?
I mean, I think that makes perfect sense with what we were philosophically, doing. The only thing I would highlight is just, implicit in passing the 1% was the idea that the 3% would be used for things that we can see.
Yes.
So once the pool is paid off, I wouldn't want to see it to all go to sewer, for instance. I think
would
that
or would not?
I would not like to see that, because that would be against, sort of what the 1% was sold to people as.
What about the streets and curb and gutter that are on top and part of the stormwater?
If it's part of like a significant like beautification and we're, thinking, then,
People can feel it touching.
yeah, then that's arguable, sure.
Can't see the sewer.
Right, exactly.
Joy?
I am in agreement with that. I guess and this is just the banker part of me that is like, if we have this, if we pay down the pool, what is the amortization of the interest saved over time versus what that money could be earning us in interest today based on current rates? That would be my only question, if it's, how much are we really saving versus losing, hanging on to that money, earning interest?
That's a good point.
That's my, but I'm all for paying down the pool if it makes sense.
What is our rate on the bond?
Like on
On the pool bond, is it like 1.2 point?
I don't have.
It's
all
pretty
the-
low.
Yeah, it's not the.
That would be the other concern, if we had to borrow money later at a high, because the rates are higher, whereas if we like put this money in like a CD or other, just.
Yeah, because CD rates are
Yeah.
definitely like,
And maybe we pay part towards the pool and put another part for like rainy day fund, kind of thing, I don't know, but, no,
Yeah.
I was just concerned about the amortization based on current rates.
So currently, like, we've received like over 21,000 just in interest on resort tax for the money sitting there. We have part of the cash sitting at Bank of Red Lodge, because Bart gave us a screaming deal on interest. And then we have also some of it at First Interstate.
yeah, and then, I mean, if there's some of it that you could put in, is it just in a safe, like a money market account, or is it in a CD, or?
They're not CDs, no.
Okay.
No, because our CDs were not getting anything for interest, they were terrible. So
Is that
we put them into SIP, our CDs anyways, and those, I can't remember what the interest, but interest has actually been really well.
Yeah, I mean, if you can save money right now, you're gonna make good.
The only thing is that I don't disagree with you from a business
Yeah.
operations, but what happens is that then we're kind of locked in that for the time period, where if we get this paid to nothing, where we might pay more for the next project, it allows us to actually move on to the next project.
Fair.
Where otherwise, then we're locked into that, and we can't necessarily move on to the next project, and so.
And who's to say we would be able to do another 500,000 or whatever next year? I mean, it just depends.
No, yeah, we probably won't be able to, yeah, I would say. And so you could do that, you could hold that money aside and say, all right, but I think it would be better if we were saying, let's, or you could build the cash up and say, all right, now we have $500,000. I mean, that would be another option. If you felt like the thing was low, you could say, we have $500,000 to do a project, as opposed to pay down the pool. That would be a realistic alternative to this. As so, say the pool's at a low interest rate, we've got this money in cash, we're not actually gonna get interest on it, but instead of paying down the pool and borrowing money again at a higher interest rate, we could use that money for another project, so that we keep moving forward with doing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if the pool's at 1 or 2%, like, why touch it? I mean, that's what I'm doing at my house too, like, we've got 2 years left on our house, I could pay it off right now, but it's like so low, then there's no interest that
Yeah.
I'm just putting that money into CDs instead.
And I don't know, again, and $500,000 is not a lot to do another project. But, especially some of the projects that we've kind of proposed. However, we're talking about doing the survey, seeing what people want, and I don't know if, with the other committees, like, there's things that sustainability wants to do, there's stuff that Parks and Rec wants to do. Are there things in their projects I know there's things in their projects that are way less than $500,000 that we could possibly, I think would fall under the resort tax fund if we wanted to do that, because they don't have.
Like the tennis courts.
Yeah.
The tennis courts, or.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we're gonna lose Lonnie in 5 minutes. Lonnie, do you have anything that you want to throw out before you leave, or that you want to get answered before you leave, or that we need to take on?
I don't think so. I think we're gonna talk later on as far as the fire portion of it and stuff, and, but yeah, I'm good with whatever you guys, I mean, it's not up to me, so.
And I would say, it doesn't have to be done in this budget year. We could carry it over, carry that, whatever that cash carryover is, then we budget that for a thing, and it could be done in July or August, so we don't have to, if we're not clear on whether we want to do that, it's not a decision that has to be made today for us to recommend to council.
We can do that when we know what our summer it looks like.
We could, yep, absolutely,
Okay.
yep, we totally could kick the can down the road just a little
Well,
bit.
and all you have to do is just keep that line item, recreational development, and we could use that money then
Well,
to pay off the pool.
Yeah, or we could actually budget in our budget for, we could put it into, pool principal and interest, and
Right.
then there's no reason, we're not bound for these line items, we're only bound for the bottom numbers, correct?
Right.
And so we can always make an adjustment within these line items if we see, especially if we've had the discussion and know that's what we're doing.
And our
So
plan can be,
placeholder-
and our plan can be pay down pool and interest, but by the way, we're gonna do that at the end of the summer, not at the beginning.
Yes,
of the
that's
summer.
perfectly fine. So, all right, so
I was just gonna ask, we do need to decide what we are going to estimate our tax revenue at.
$500,000 more than what we brought in this year.
Do you think,
I think that's not high enough.
That's 1.6?
Yeah, last year we did 1.8.
No, that's 1.9. We're
1.9.
already at almost on 1.4.
Oh,
Right.
The year that we got bit, we had how much more than we anticipated?
Not 500,000. What's that?
what, sorry, I guess.
400?
Yeah, what was
It
the?
was 400.
The year that we got bit, how much, we gave 400,000 back, because we went over and above and picked a number that there was no way we were gonna get there. We went 400,000
What would make you
over.
comfortable? 600? Above what we brought in this year?
As long as we don't build it into the we will spend it
I-
category, I have nothing
Yeah.
wrong with a million.
That's where those places, that 800.
Yeah, okay, so we're at almost 1.4. So you're saying go 500,000, we'd still be at the 1.9?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I
And I'm
understand.
saying, what's
Sorry.
the downside to 2.5 as
There's-
long as you don't do something?
Well, it just starts to be too far out.
It's,
It just starts to be too far out.
It's,
It skews your numbers.
Yeah,
yeah,
it just everything.
there's,
Okay.
there's
And
like
so,
being,
and understand it,
halfway
what we
through it.
expect is 1.4, based on this past year,
Mm-hmm.
plus 5, that gets us to 1.9,
yeah,
plus, let's just assume we're doing this today, plus 9 in cash, so that's 2.9 is what we would be budgeting for this year.
Okay, and does that,
In
so,
expenditures.
your 500,000, I wanna add to our best year, not what we got this year or last year.
This is our best year.
Did we surpass it?
mhm.
Yeah, by quite a bit.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I would be comfortable with 1.9, I guess,
Okay.
for the revenue side, estimating our, would you, resort tax revenue? Okay. I mean, gosh, if we make that, that'd be amazing. How about you, Chris?
I don't understand the 500, where that's coming from.
Over and
Is that-
above what we collected this
It's
year.
just saying that this year we brought in 1.4, well, what if we all see a 50%, or 20%, increase in business, every business across the board sees 20%, then we're gonna bring in, I'm just gonna round this, instead of 1.4, we're gonna bring in an extra $300,000, so we would have 1.6.
Let me take a different stab at it. 5 years ago, we said, this is how much we made, we're gonna add X.
1.7.
We earned this, we had to give it back. The rule is, spend some number you
This is a
you,
fake number that.
it's a
500
fake
is
number that
okay.
we get to keep if we have an unforeseen year.
Gotcha. And this is that you're talking, starting this July 1st, going forward?
We do it every year.
We have to
So
do
last
an
year, we
estimate
amended
of
at
our-
the meeting, it was 400 or 500, they amended it at the meeting, they raised it up a little bit. And you don't spend it until you know it's coming in, but that way you don't have to give it back on property taxes, which is the process we don't wanna go through again.
I just
Is that
wasn't
what you
clear
were
on
referring
if
to
the
earlier?
500 was a fake number or the, I guess, 2.9.
$500 is
Optimistic.
what our expenditures will budget at. But you can actually budget for a holdover too, I mean, that's
A reserve,
Yeah.
a reserve.
Which I put 20,000 budget document,
Yeah.
20,000 is what we,
But-
for a reason.
But you could say, I'm gonna pay off the pool for $2 million. Well, we're not gonna do it if we don't get $2 million. But if we do, we have the ability to do something with it rather than have to give it back.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna move us on.
Okay.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Yeah, is there anything else you guys need?
Oh, just a quick clarification, I think you kind of subbed on this. When we were talking about this $900,000, this is just on the 3%, does not include the 1%.
Does not
The
include
1% has its own
It's its
thing.
own fund.
Okay, perfect, that's what I thought, I just
Yeah.
wanted to confirm that because I don't wanna get confused on that piece.
yeah, we can't.
Okay. So, I just want consensus on this, is that we've had a good conversation here, we're not gonna make a decision or a recommendation. We will budget to pay down the pool for $500,000 just in our budget or some number close to that, okay? And then we will continue to discuss this in our July and our August meetings. Maybe we'll really kick it down to the August meeting. And we can, if we choose to, move that number to something else, if we choose to keep the pool and do some kind of other improvement instead of paying down pool debt. Reasonable?
Yes, I would like to hear from, down the road, I guess, from Parks Board and Sustainability, what projects they also have.
So that gives us some,
And I think this year we actually called it
Recreational development.
recreational development activities, which allows us to use it for many different things.
so we can put it into recreation, we can put the whole thing into recreational development. So here is our base budget for next year, and, the way that we have talked about this. So what this gives us, all right, is, it's about $1 million. I dropped the law enforcement to 75,000. There would be some implication that's gonna, some of this is gonna carry over into next year. There's another option to do this, and this year you budget 25 for them and say, hey, here's what you have available for capital for this year. Next year, you're gonna have $110,000, so you can buy cars. So that's a question to the mayor. He can do it either way. But next year, in any case, we're gonna have to budget $110,000 if they're expecting to buy 2 new cars.
And the reason they're doing that is you get a discount when you buy 2 cars versus one.
When they're the same cars, and, I mean, maybe they're not, but whatever. Yes, I think that makes sense as opposed to doing one a year. It's just an easier process. Okay, so is there anybody, all right, I wanna talk about something, because there's an item up there. It's $80,000 for, fire and EMS. It really is for fire. It's not for EMS, and I can fix that. Just so
You
there's
were
not-
supposed to do that when Lonnie was here, just so you know. No.
Because EMS should be good now, right?
EMS is good. So this is for
Yeah,
fire.
congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Well, I mean, there's nothing that
Congratulations to
excludes
everybody.
from spending resort tax bill money on EMS stuff, but just, this is what we're talking about here. We have not typically spent, although when we did the survey, fire and EMS ranked high in the resort tax, we have not, over the life of the resort tax, spent pretty much anything on, fire and EMS. We did an adjustment in for emergency services, and we started down that road, but that's then when we moved the fire department to a contract, and, we've spent, money on law enforcement, but not much money on EMS. I did have a thing that showed our total lifetime spend on fire and EMS, but I don't remember what, it was very low. So, in any case, what the piece here is that, the city has an agreement with the fire district to provide fire protection services. That agreement spells out that the city pays 28 mils. The reason we settled on the 28 mil number was the city did not want to have to, at the time, they did not want to have to commit to maintaining capital. So the city did not want to be responsible for the ever-increasing cost of fire trucks, is essentially the simple version of that. So the 28 mils was supposed to cover operations and capital for a fire department. The grand scheme of things, it's a very reasonable expenditure. This is my fire chief hat, just for 1 second. It's a very reasonable expenditure for the city for fire protection. Take off my fire chief hat. So the question is it reasonable if the resort tax were to spend $80,000 on capital for the fire department, what the city is gonna try to negotiate, and there'd be some negotiations back and forth on this, is an $80,000 reduction in their obligation to the rural fire district. And what that would do is free up somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000 to general fund expenditures. Give them a little bit more leeway.
Breathing room.
This would take them down to what the expenditure was before valuations went up.
Would it still be mail-based?
The agreement would still be mill-based, yes.
But
It may not at all be mail-based. That's part of the discussion
I
that's gonna be
know.
happening. Our
Because-
auditor said that they didn't want us to do it that way.
I know, and
The auditor
that,
said they didn't think it was a great idea. I didn't say
It's
I
not-
didn't want you to do it
Well,
that
we
way.
don't know.
Okay, let's listen to the tax man here.
Can I just say that I think it's a terrible idea?
I think what it should be is a percentage of, what we should do is establish what 28 mills has historically been as a percentage of the budget, and then set
Of
that
the-
as a percentage of the general
Of the
budget.
total general fund budget, the fire chief in me would be amiable to that.
But,
That was the conversation we've had in the past, so.
Yeah.
Yes,
Just-
Jeremy.
just so we have
Listen
this,
to
but-
Jeremy.
I feel like
Jeremy
this, I
talk.
feel like this has been missed a lot, and maybe you're not missing it, but when you define it by mills out of a thing that's already mills-based.
No, that's what we're saying, not mill space.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Because,
Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead then.
But it's a
28 mills.
disproportionately high portion of what they get, they get a higher percentage of the general fund budget this year than they did last year,
Right.
thanks to.
Because the number of mills we can assess
Correct,
is
because
going down.
it's defined by mills of mills.
Right.
So, mills is fine as long as it's just general mills that the taxpayers pay.
The problem is that mills is a great way to do it outside of state law, which reduces mills based on the value of property, right?
And then 3%,
It
Um,
reduces,
yeah,
it reduces
1/2 of-
mills in order that local governments don't balloon their budget,
More than half of,
half of the rate.
half the rate of
Yeah.
inflation over the last 3 years.
but there's a piece of that the mills so if you took that away, then it would be kind of a set piece. The challenge is that how do you build an agreement that, accounts for, new development and some of those pieces, and so,
And,
so it is.
and I am completely confident that we are gonna get to an agreement in the same page.
Yeah.
I have zero
I
concern
just, as
about that.
admin and finance over here, we are very concerned about having it be a mill base, because when I first got on council, in the first budget I saw, I think we were collecting almost 98 mills. And this last year,
106.
yeah, and this last year, we were at like 67 or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm like, it's just, and if the fire department continues to get 28 mills, pretty soon you're gonna get our whole general fund,
so
so,
somewhere in the 110 mark to somewhere in the mid-70s.
yeah,
That's the drop.
But it's only gonna go down,
right. The number of
Not
mills that
gonna
we
go
can
back up.
assess, yeah.
unless
Yeah.
something.
So
So-
the answer is, but if we can establish that, and so to be clear on a couple of different things, one of the differences between fire and EMS is we are statutorily required to provide fire
Absolutely,
unless it is provided via another mechanism.
right,
We'll have that conversation.
yes.
But for now, like I said, if I can say, here's the percentage of, and what it has been is X percentage of the budget, and here's the range, and here's the mean, great, that's what we're gonna do that number on. That way it grows as our new builds grow, which this year's
Mhm.
gonna be a record. It grows as we do annexation, but it doesn't become a disproportionately high portion of it.
Right,
So,
And our fire chief is a very reasonable guy, so those
So-
conversations are gonna go well.
so the question becomes, for us, because we're not gonna solve the city's budget problem, but I think it is good to have the context. Is it okay, the city is obligated to provide fire protection, we just need to start with that. Are you guys okay with, and it is allowed in the ordinance, adding fire protection in as, the capital for fire protection, adding that into the resort tax budget, just like we're doing for streets, for law enforcement, for, parks and pool, adding that in as the obligation, which then the resort tax will bear the capital portion, the taxpayers will bear the operational portion.
I would be okay with
I'm
that.
okay with that, yeah, as long as it goes down by that equal amount.
Yeah, we gotta balance that, right? It's gotta balance. Fire trucks are expensive, I'll tell you that right now, in case, just so you know,
They're like a
A little more than
million.
80 probably.
yes, you're not gonna buy a fire, this would be
We
a
can't
fire.
use our reserve to buy the 800,000, we couldn't just go out and buy a fire truck. with
You
it.
could not just go out and buy a fire truck for
There you
$500,000. So, somewhere between 800,000 and $1 million for a fire truck. The current fire truck that the city does own, the city does own one fire truck that we use, was purchased in 2004 for $250,000. To buy that comparable fire truck today is $1 million.
So how does that work with the 80,000 then? Would you have to wait until?
No,
had enough money
you would,
saved up, or
this would be
own-
another borrow thing.
We would
and-
own part of the fire truck?
Yeah,
No, the city would borrow the money, buy the fire truck, and they, as part of the agreement, the city would, lease or, you know, it would be part of an interlocal agreement, wouldn't even have to be dollar-wise, but you could say it's $1, basically, the city would give the fire truck to the rural fire district to use for fire protection services
So just,
as part of the payment in.
But that would be on our balance sheet.
the city would
That's-
borrow the money and make the payments, not you borrow it and we make the payments for you?
That's the conversation for the auditor. So,
Okay,
option one is, the city borrows the money, or option two is the city gives to the rural fire district $80,000 to be used in capital. So that's the piece. Either one of those could work, but it sounds like the auditors would prefer for the city to retain ownership of the vehicle. And
and
I
that
don't
fits,
have
yeah.
I have an opinion either way. I could argue both are beneficial. So the advantage to the city keeping it, I would say, is that if the agreement ever falls apart, then the city at least owns the fire truck.
Yeah, where are we gonna go with that?
That is the other part of it.
We'll be
It's
running
just-
around with our one
it's
little
just-
fire truck.
Yeah, it's just the mechanics of it, and.
Like
but
with no fire station.
It sounds like the auditors don't love the idea of, I don't think there's anything in the ordinance that says the city has to own everything it uses for pays on resort tax. And as we know, when we look at all these other resort tax entities, I mean, West Yellowstone pays money for their fire operations to Hegden Basin Rural Fire District. It's a good portion of their resort tax goes to it. Big Sky pays a good portion of their resort tax to the Big Sky Fire District, for fire protection. So it is pretty common in these.
But it's a conversation we weren't gonna have until you guys signed off on it, and then his next meeting, which is at 7:00, they also have to sign off at it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's why.
No, I would be okay with that. Obviously, I feel that our emergency services should partially be paid out of resort tax because our tourist industry absolutely affects every single.
The problem with that is that the way our resort tax was written and passed by the voters,
I know.
there's limits in how we can.
I know there is, but I have no problem using it for capital for the fire department. In fact, I would
As long as
be
it's
fine.
within the rules.
As long as it's in the, yeah. But if we get down to the survey, there's a possibility that we, if we ask that question of our voter, in the survey, if they would be okay with it not just being capital, might
Why
be,
do they act inappropriately?
yes. Yes.
Well, negotiate the best you can for the city,
Yep.
negotiate the best you can for the fire department.
The good news is,
Yeah.
we have the same customer base.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna, I mean, as I say, is that, in the end, the taxpayers win, right? Like, if there's a piece of what you're doing, but in the end, the money is never leaving the hands of the taxpayers, right? And so, no matter which way it goes, it all benefits the people who need the services, which is really what matters, so. It's not like I get paid more because we do this agreement, or something like that.
Right.
Cool.
You're not gonna give yourself the grace.
Actually, he gets paid less because he donates a lot of time for advisory service.
Yes.
Because my hourly.
So fire department is I lose money in the fire department because of,
Me?
I lose money in my business because I spend time in the fire department, because it's like a way to say that,
I know.
so,
I understand that,
yeah.
that arrangement.
Okay.
Okay, so,
So is 80,000, I guess my question would be, is 80,000 enough? Or should we go up to 100?
it depends on how quickly.
The question is, are you guys conceptually okay with it? Then we'll come back with a real number, but those conversations need to happen, but it's not appropriate for those conversations to happen until you guys sign off in spirit on the thing.
Okay.
Ask Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, our general fund is always strapped, always, it just is. And, when it comes down to it, paying off the pool early or being able to keep our staff employed and paid.
I'll tell you the difference between 80 and 100 from my perspective in the fire district is I have to, again, I can't, move cash from operations to capital, guaranteed capital, then I lose money in operations.
Right, that's why I
And so
was.
I have to make sure that I don't do that in such a way that then I don't have enough money in the
Right, and that's why I was
operations piece, so.
asking, you know, from our perspective versus yours, I mean, how much can you afford to?
And there is, I will tell you, there's a piece that I have thought of in this and how this maybe could work, and, you know, again, it pushes is that, you know, as opposed to being a fixed dollar amount, maybe it's a percentage of the resort tax, so that, you know, as you see growth, there's also growth in the expenditure, you know, and I'd say that it was
What was that, what was 80,000,
7%, 7. Well, sorry, it depends on what number we put in for
Right.
our realistic, on the one point, I can do this just quickly for you.
The
Let's put it in
1.4.
You think it's
percentage of last
7% or
year's resort
80,000?
tax.
Yes, that's what I need to do, so I need to put in.
That's why I said next year's budget is gonna
There's
be.
about
really-
5.86%, so, you know, if you did 5% or something like that, it probably, that's the 5.86, so
Okay.
6%.
Okay,
What are the odds of the city just being annexed into the fire district?
So honestly, I think they're fairly good, it's just the city taxpayers have to be okay with another 20 million tax increase. But then that would free up the entire amount.
Yeah.
But, you know, so from a fire protection standpoint, what I would say is that
Is this
What-
a petition thing?
yes,
Yeah.
the petition thing, is that I'd like to see both of those, because what happens is that, because the city hasn't put in any in capital, then by pulling in the city, then that's gonna be a hit for the fire district. So if we did 5% in resort tax and an annexation, that would free up somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 for the city in operational funds, which would probably, I don't wanna say solve their problems, but it would make life a lot
It
easier.
delays it for a few years. So basically,
A lot.
in this year's tax presentation, it's gonna start with the slide of here's your property taxes, school, blah, 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 here's the city, then it comes over, and it's gonna say, here's taxes. What we get to do goes up 1/2 of the cost of living over the last 3 years, that's it. And then here's, by the way, what happens to COLA, cost of living for the employees. So that 3%, we get that, plus we get new taxable, or we get annexation or increases. The only other options are into that is the public agrees to do a tax rate, new bills, annexation, at the 28 mills shift to the county, or we decrease services. That's the equation, that's it. Those are the choices. Meeting's almost to be adjourned.
I know, but I've gotta leave,
No, that's
even
okay.
if it's not.
No, you're running it.
I know.
What do you wanna do to it, or are they still continuing in the absence?
So
of-
I do have a survey program I use,
Okay.
it's called Typeform. I'm paying for it right now, actually I'm paying myself, fire district is theoretically reimbursing for me, it costs about $100 a month. But, you know, honestly, we could, you know, you only really need to pay that while you have the survey open. I do still have it open from our EMS survey. It is, does a really good job. I actually had it build the survey, but I couldn't get it, I literally spent like 3 minutes on it, but I can build the survey quickly in Typeform and send it out to you guys.
Do I have to pay that out of admin because it can't be paid for out of resort tax?
I think you could get away with the resort tax.
So it's resort tax, right, so. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
Meeting.
Let me know if anything interesting comes out of that next one. He heard me, right?
Yes.
What is his next meeting?
Fire.
Fire.
To talk about
It's
whether or not.
it's literally to go to see if they're okay with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We wanna talk about
And the
survey?
other one is the resort tax, which is like West Yellowstone, which just
Push
goes
this
straight
for
into
next meeting.
general.
It's
But
up
the
to you
voters
guys,
have to do
That would be different.
My biggest question on the survey for the group is, I really would like us to come up, like, why do we want to do the survey? And what's our singular objective? So then, because then editing all the questions then just kind of falls into place, like, okay, if we're asking this question, what are we gonna do with the responses? Does this meet our objectives? And I think if we're all in agreement on why we want to do the survey, the rest of it will fall into place, because like I said, the existing survey is decent, there's a lot of good questions we can build from,
Right.
your edits were great. So I think, yeah, I think we're in a good spot, we just need to be in agreement on what's the purpose of doing it, not just we wanna do a survey, it's not.
Right.
I think we know the answers to a lot of these, but it's nice to break it out. You know, those first 3 questions are just, you know, if you're a resident and if you're a business owner. And then number 5, how likely are you to vote yes on renewing the resort
Yeah, that
tax
can just
today?
be gone,
That
yeah.
can just go
Yeah.
away.
Yeah,
And then
Because
really,
we're
I
not-
think I don't even think we need number 6. Do you feel the appropriate items are taxed? Like, we've already.
Yeah, do we guys
yeah,
vote on
because
your?
we are supposed to,
We
is
review
that
it
every
every 5,
we're supposed to review that
so
number.
that would be something I would still wanna keep.
So you, okay,
Yeah,
all right,
okay.
that's fine.
So is that like coming up next year, we have to review those
Pretty
items?
soon.
Yeah,
I mean, number 9 is really, I think, what I wanna know. Like, what do you want this to be used for?
Can I go backwards 1 second? And I
Yeah.
know I'm just kind of a guest here, kind of building a budget. This goes back to the money and spending it on it. We are in the process of right now, we did a test lift down in front of Moosley Tees. The goal is to have non-trippable sidewalks on Broadway within 2 months.
From now.
How'd the
From
test,
now.
how'd the
Really?
test go?
Pardon?
How'd the test go?
It still requires some grinding, but Mike called it an 80% success in that it still required some grinding afterwards.
Mhm.
So there are a couple of different, so yeah, no, as in like this season it
Yeah,
should be done.
Really?
It's,
So they're smoothing the existing is the idea, right?
this is smoothing the,
They'll be
so what they
lifting
do
part
is,
of it.
so the genesis of it, if I may, is if you go down tonight, when you walk out there and look down Broadway, what you're gonna notice
Oh, yeah.
is you're gonna see a bright white panel that's there, and if you go down and look at that panel, you're gonna see there's a water meter in it.
Yep.
And then what you're gonna see on both sides is that the panels next to it have settled down. So basically, this is a byproduct of something that the city did 12 years ago that's there, which to me was fantastic news because now I know whose job it is to fix it. The challenge that we have is the way our ordinances read right now, this is from council. You as an owner, as a business owner, you are responsible for the sidewalk in front of your house. In this particular situation, we created the problem. A good share that we're looking at, we're still waiting for a couple of final estimates to come back, but we're looking at about $80,000 for the project as a whole.
I thought Mike said 50 to 60.
No, his was 77 to 80, but we're still waiting for a couple of bits here. So there's two different bits to it. It may have been the lifting was 50, but then there's the grinding part, except the lifting, I think, was 35.
And he was looking at
And the
buying a
grinding.
grinder.
And he's looking at buying a grinder. So what his original proposal was he was looking at water, because it's their problem we're fixing, streets, I think in part because the grinder, because it's adjacent to streets, he fit into that. I was also looking to it as if we need to, is this something we can utilize resort tax for? And I've talked to Tom, and we didn't get it asked here, but what is the feeling of this group if we send some sort of the resort tax? It's seeable, it's out there, and it's part of its impact, and it's part of the money. And then the other thought was that his specific spot was, and I'll come back to the second, is that all the businesses gave up their 5% that they were entitled to keep and put it back in, so use that for part of that. So,
Well,
pardon?
previously entitled.
That they were previously entitled to, but they said they were okay with giving it up.
Yeah.
So Mike's Maples take back from this is, he looked at streets, he looked at water, and he wanted to have every business owner chip in for $300. Now, I can tell you why there's all sorts of good reasons to do that. I can tell you if we take the bureaucratic approach, which is we pass an ordinance and say, everybody puts in $300 and then we're to put on your taxes, you're now suddenly talking next year before it happens. The approach that I think we're leaning towards now is, if you'll chip in $300, we're gonna do this in front of you. If not, you're responsible for fixing it, and it's all out of your pocket. And so and that way there's no bureaucratic stuff that goes to it. We can do it much more quickly. But the conversation that has also come up is, how do you guys feel about spending some number, 20, 30,000, not a lot, but spending some number toward leveling streets on sidewalks?
I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, Broadway is,
I'm
Yeah,
not
part
comfortable
of
with assessing $300 for business. That was not anything that they did.
Yeah.
You know, even if it is technically their responsibility, like, it's the
Yeah.
city's responsibility.
Yeah, I really kind of agree
I
with
think
that. I
that's
think
really
it's
unappetizing.
it's
but our
the,
committee doesn't have anything to do with that, sorry.
No, I'm on
The what?
I'm speaking with my public works hat. I don't,
Is this a council meeting or is this a resort?
No, but, so if some of the money comes from resort tax, I heard
Right.
it's an okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
I would be okay
Yeah,
with all the
yeah.
money coming from
And
resort
then I
tax,
heard two
honestly.
people saying not good going to the businesses.
yeah,
And they
I'm fine
just
with
happen to own
resort tax.
businesses.
That would
No.
be like, we talked about snow blowing our main business district, which I'm in favor of, out of resort tax, because that's where we make our money, like, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, they,
When businesses are so inconsistent with doing it themselves. so,
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you too. And I think, yeah, Edgewood, we can market that.
And I would just, if council will put that down, I guarantee you I will make it happen. But it's, the ordinances that prohibit that right now are what's on the books. So, all right, okay.
which one,
Pardon?
what ordinance is on?
The one that says you are responsible for the sidewalk in front of your business?
Even if the city, it's something the
even
city
if it's
did?
not their fault.
No, I'm talking about the snow. I was switching to
Oh.
the snow and
Oh,
stuff
snow.
like
Oh,
that, yeah.
yeah.
Sorry.
And it says they're to the sidewalks too, so there's part, anyway, so if we end up spending some resort tax collectively, it's good. I've got two council member here who are gonna push back on my, and anyway, we're gonna be moving forward with this project and we'll figure out some of the details.
Yeah, no,
So-
I'm totally fine with resort tax being spent
Interestingly
on
enough, the
this
businesses that I've talked to have not batted an eye at the 300. Now, having
Oh,
said
have
that,
they?
I know that there's gonna be a dozen that we'll never hear from, that are never gonna chip up there, and that part causes me grief. So the only reason there's a benefit to it is the scalability from Joe Blow citizen. How come you fixed it in front of that business? Is that business more important than I am as a citizen? Well, no, but we screwed yours up. If we screwed the sidewalk up in front
Yeah,
of yours, then I
exactly.
think we're okay doing it.
And that absolutely happened in front of somebody's house that they contacted me on when they,
Never fixed my sidewalk.
yeah, when they put the water line in, it sunk, like literally instantly, and they had to come and fix it.
Yeah.
They had to jack it, I mean, they had to.
And I'm okay with that, that's scalable, so anyway, thank you,
Yeah.
sorry. I just, that was one of the things we were gonna check before Tom left, and I know his feeling, but what I hear from the rest of you, if you're okay with that. Pardon?
How many businesses are you talking about?
As far as the numbers or that I have talked to?
To get
just to
the
get
300 times the 300
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you, I would look to Jody more on that. No, how many businesses on Broadway between, the Rock Shop and Merv's?
So even if you have a perfect sidewalk, you'd still chip in $300?
You show me that sidewalk, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a fair point, so.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable going back and pushing back against Mike and saying this is council's direction and guidance. I'm very comfortable doing that.
Well, we're gonna talk about it at Public Works on the agenda, so,
Okay.
I'd be interested to see what, business owners say. I know you've got a business on Main Street, but.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm not hijacking your meeting, go back.
Yeah,
My
no,
question was,
go ahead.
are you okay with resort tax?
Yeah,
Sorry.
fine.
yes,
Yeah.
okay, yes,
Okay, and I don't want us to stay over just to talk about the survey, but I think,
okay.
so based on what I've heard, and maybe, I know I just didn't want to assume anything, but are we safe to say that the purpose for doing the survey is to find out what the, residents of Red Lodge want to do with resort tax money? Is it the residents being the most important? Do we not care about, I mean, and I just don't want to assume anything.
It's good to know the outlying,
We certainly still will ask, I just.
Yeah.
But it does need to be
Yeah, and the reason for that is I would change the order of the questions in the survey, because why are we asking what's important at the very end? So, these would all, because that's why I wanted to ask what the objective is, so we can craft the survey, knowing what edits we've already kind of discussed. I can throw another draft together. Tom said he could build something out, maybe we could look at that then at our next meeting, which I won't be at, but.
In my mind, the main purpose.
I know, July.
Yeah, the main purpose
Just give us
is like,
access to the documents and then
Yeah,
we can
yeah,
edit
yeah.
it as necessary, but.
Go ahead, Jeremy, I'm sorry.
yeah, whatever. You got the highlights, it's fine.
Okay, so, yeah, to me, the main purpose of it is to see if people's priorities have changed, now that we have the pool built, now that they're seeing, how it's being spent, or, do we need to do more education to the people on, maybe they don't think it's being spent right. We don't wanna get to that place again, where they think we're just blowing it all.
I feel like we should provide a recap of where where, you know, where we are right now, what we spent our money on, what the ordinance says, you know, just like a 2 or 3 paragraph overview, so they know.
No one will read it. Yeah.
I think they will, I think
Part of
they
the
will.
reason why-
If
We
they're
need
gonna
to figure
take
out-
the survey,
If
they'll
someone wants
read
to
it.
take a stab at putting that, because I don't have that background information, if someone wants to take a stab at that, we can figure out how we can
Okay.
put that in. But there were
I'm happy
certain
to do
questions
that.
where I felt like there needs to be some kind of explanation, and that's why I was curious about what tools are available, because a lot of times you can like scroll over and that becomes like, you know, like a pop-up or it shows.
Oh,
you-
yeah.
Yeah, so it's
So
like,
if you want more information.
yeah.
And timing wise, you don't see this getting done before September, is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Okay. And that would be my input, is because what I said, I wanna be able to say, here's where we are, and here's the methods, because one of the you know, what can we do from resort tax to help fix this, so. I wanna be able to tell that story, and then you have them go out and ask the questions.
I think the reason the survey went well last time is because it was almost a follow-up to all of the engagement we were doing prior.
With
So
the
we
1%.
had we had town meetings, we sent out, you know, we had various meetings here, and there was just a lot of conversation around it before people even took the survey.
Yeah.
So we would need to kind of replace that with something.
Well, and why wouldn't we just do those same things
I
if they
mean-
work?
And we could do that.
Yeah, if
as
it
well.
works well before, if that plan, and again, I wasn't here, so whatever works well,
Yeah.
not recreate the wheel.
And we've had really good success with surveys in the last few years too, you know, with short-term rentals, with,
Yeah,
the
depends on
Just
who's
a-
reading it.
what?
That short-term rental survey, like, depends who's reading it and what they want to cherry pick. But,
Yeah, I know.
And with the EMS one, you know, I think people are more used to taking a short survey now than they were in the past, and we have ways to get that, you know, access on the phone or, you know, QR codes posted on, like.
Well, and one of the things I would like to add in here is, for a possibility of resort tax being spent on, would be for grant writing. Because we can't do that right now. And I know they have local event funding / grants, but I think those are two totally
Yeah, we
different
split it
things.
out, yeah.
I'm like, because, I mean, somebody may like, I don't want to spend my resort tax on an event, but yeah, I do, you know, so I mean, it's two totally different things. Because we found that, you know, if you spend $20,000 on grant writing, you could get back $100,000. So it,
Or
and.
nothing.
Or nothing, but, you know, but typically, you know, you're gonna, if you have a good grant writer or, someone who is trained in that, you will hopefully be going after more grants that we're not even, I mean, you get zero of something you've never applied for, you know, and maybe grant matches, grant writing and grant matches, put that out there. So it would give us the opportunity, if we do get a big grant and we need to take $100,000 for a match, we could use it, you know, if, it would have to be voted on, obviously, at that point.
Yeah, one of the
but-
things that, this was another area that I didn't have knowledge on, or just glancing at it, I could have gone back to the ordinance and matched it all up, but someone, just based, because you guys have been here longer than me, that list of stuff that we have, it'd be kind of nice to categorize it, because again, to educate people, like, okay,
Yeah.
these are the list, here's the list of all the things, but these are the things we could fund today, these are the things that would require us rewriting the thing. Because if there's a
Absolutely.
whole bunch of stuff that's below that, then we know that they'd be open, that just tells us that, and that
I think
provides
that's
that
a great
education piece
Yeah,
with how that question
absolutely.
becomes structured.
Yeah, like, we can currently spend it on these items. What
Yeah.
are your priorities? We would have to have it re-voted on by the public to spend it on these. Are you open to any of these?
Yeah.
And if we get a majority of people that say, yeah, we want to spend it on that, then we can go back
Yeah.
and we can put it to a vote again to be able to allow that. You know, it may or may not pass, but we could do that.
What do you guys think about, I personally don't like what one thing would you know, there's too many things on there. If there were 4 things, I would be like, okay, this is the one.
Yeah,
But there are, you know, like 20 of them.
There's a lot of things.
There's a lot,
Yeah.
so and I don't know, do we want,
can they just prioritize them, you know?
We could certainly have them ranked like their top.
Yeah,
And again, that's why I think if we kind of put them in buckets, like, these are things we can do today, these are things that would require a vote. Your top what are your top 3 items, or what are your top, you know, we can figure out what we wanna do, or just
Mhm.
even rank them however they want. But usually, like, if there's 10 things that they have to rank, they're not gonna sit there and try to,
Right.
that becomes too hard. But, we can figure out how to structure those and if there, and some of those things too, if we can bucket things together, like, should we spend it on parks? Should we spend it on tennis, you know, like, what,
Yeah.
you know,
These are, you know, out of these projects for parks, what's your priority?
yeah.
You know, that type of thing,
Or even,
Do you want
Could you-
new tennis courts? Do you want a new hockey rink? Do you want a new,
yeah,
pickleball courts?
yeah.
yeah.
Whatever, or just,
Yeah.
you know, keeping status
Or people
quo.
be like, I hate parks, you know, and move on.
Yeah.
So-
Zero, nothing.
But yeah, I think there's some things we can do to make that more digestible. And again, I don't know how the original sentence was essentially given. I just used it, pulled it right off that results survey, so.
Yeah,
In my mind, there's kind of 2 categories almost, so there's the general categories of what you would want it to be spent on, so like, you know, the list we have, so
The
like fire.
obligations.
Well, not even that, but, you know, parks or, you know, affordable housing or something, you know, whatever the categories are. And then there's another one, which is a specific thing. And so last time it was pool, that was
Right.
just kind of,
mhm,
you know, that arose as an obvious one from the meeting, and just because that was a need. But
Right.
that would be the other part of it that I would wanna,
That's a good way to phrase it too, though, because then we can have a general sense for what areas people are concerned about. So if we figured out what those general buckets were, and then had those specific things, and we're not gonna, the other thing too is, we just need to realize, we're not gonna be able to list every possible thing that somebody's gonna
No.
come up with.
Right.
But it does make our lives a lot easier if we can give them more options, rather than just having an other, and then 50 million people fill out something
Right.
random, and,
And it was too, like the workforce housing, right now, we can't spend any money on workforce housing, and it was a very low, when this first survey was done, but things have changed since then, so absolutely, maybe different now.
so like, what is the next pool?
Yeah, we
Should be
could,
the
we could
next
separate
one.
that into
Yeah.
some questions, like, of the things that are we're legally able to fund, how do you rank these? And then, would you consider changing the ordinance or the nature of the spending to include any of these?
I can give you my guess is what that's going to be. And it's gonna be streets. And the good news is we're putting ourselves in a position that we can actually do something about that now, if that does come up as the next one.
And we can already spend it on streets.
But we already are, well, I guess.
So you're saying out of what we can already spend it on, you
Well,
think
I'm
people are
just,
gonna want
where do
streets?
you wanna see the money spent? Where are you gonna see it, you know, where are people gonna say, yeah, that's, you know, they say the pool, yeah, that's our money, that's the stuff we're letting the passers through pay for. Streets hasn't been an option with wastewater and stormwater issues underneath.
Right.
And they are now it was when somebody said, what's the next pool?
Mhm.
I can tell you what the next pool is. The next pool is streets.
You think so?
I hear it.
That's probably the biggest complaint I hear when you.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, and everyone might be, but that's part of what our education,
It-
front loading of the work.
Yeah,
would be.
and
Well, if Dave knows, we don't need to do a survey.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying is I really like his question of what's the next pool? Because it's
Yeah.
kind of, what are we hearing? We knew the pool was gonna be the answer before we
We
did the
did.
survey.
Right.
The survey validated what we were hearing
Well,
daily on a
and-
regular basis.
Originally, we were gonna do the 1% for the pool, but we got shut down. Remember that?
I do think Jeremy brings up a good point, though, like, the survey's only gonna be as successful as the education we put behind it, and so,
Yes.
I think that's, I mean, I don't wanna we can get the questions and get that all squared away, but we do need to, like, figure out what that plan looks like and what we're willing to commit to, because that is work, and we all have a lot of things to do. So what, you know, do we need to do it as elaborate as before? Does it need to be, you know, or if we do scale it down and figure out what that looks like?
I feel like the town meetings, they were work, but they weren't an excessive amount of work, and for the
Yeah.
success that they were.
And they were, the good news is they were pleasant things. So many meetings we have,
Yeah.
there's two different sides. The question is, do you want a pink pool or a blue pool? Then that's not a hard
Yeah.
conversation.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
And my only 2 cents is, let's get through the budget cycle, because I think that equips it to be more successful.
Yep.
And, I mean, I'm good having another public meeting. We did it at Roosevelt. We did a presentation on how it's been spent. What the budget
Who was
looks
gonna
like.
adjourn this meeting? Who's second when Tom leaves?
Sure.
That'd be me. We all adjourned?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for taking notes.